Hello, thanks for joining this session. We have a great webinar for you, and I'd like to tell you a few things in advance. My name is Dalim, and I'm in the very fortunate position of being the chairman of 3 great groups in BCS. BCS is the British Computer Society, the prestigious Chartered Institute for IT. And we have got, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of members. In fact, we've got heading towards 70,000 members. And in BCS, there are many, many different groups. And I'm really fortunate to be the head of 3 of them: London North, London South, and very much in the middle, London Central branches of the BCS. Together, we can reach, from these 3 branches, we can reach about 10,000 of BCS's members. So you are in very good company. And if you're not already a member of BCS, which I hope you are, but if you're not already, please do consider it. And I'll tell you more about that later. But I've got some other colleagues I'd like to introduce you to before we start. With me on this session are my great friends and colleagues, David Grundy, who is the secretary and technical coordinator for this session. He is the secretary, in fact, of BCS London Central branch, and he's a member of BCS, of course. And also we have Chloe Basu, who has a double role as my daughter, and she is also an MBCS, a member of the British Computer Society. But tonight's session is, of course, a Wominspiration session, inspiring women with inspiration for everyone, and that means you. You may well be an inspiring person as well, who might wish to do one of these sessions later. If so, get in touch, tell us more. Let's see if we can do it. We're very fortunate tonight to have with us Shazmin, Dr. Shazmin Majid. And I want to tell you a little bit about Shazmin before I hand over to Chloe, who will do the questions to Shazmin in the fireside chat interview session we've got lined up for you. Shazmin, what can I say about Shazmin? Well, she's head of user research and insights for the UK at a company called EPAM Systems. She herself is based in London, I know, but also has a UK-wide role. She will tell you more about that as we go through, I'm sure. Now, she focuses her time on understanding human behavior to design better apps, websites, and other types of digital products. Human behavior, my word, she's got a few lifetimes of work to do there, I think. Now, in this fireside chat, we'll talk about Shazmin's role at EPAM, and also her doctoral background, where she looked at human-computer interactions. So that's the nature of this evening's session. About Shazmin, some more about her. Well, as I said, she's the head of user research and insights for the UK at EPAM. The main aspect of her role is around understanding human behavior. Now, Shazmin has an undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's degree in psychological research from Sheffield University. And these provide her with vital knowledge in how we operate as humans. I think I could do with that as well, couldn't you? We could do with lots of experience in terms of these complex creatures that we are a little subset of, the human race. But Shazmin may or may not be an expert. Let's find out. Now, Shazmin's previous roles at EPAM range from working with criminals with severe mental health issues, improving mental health services in Egypt, to designing apps that use AI to detect depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. So AI is very much one of the subjects that is in high focus today, and we can ask Shazmin more about that. If you have questions as we go through, by the way, do put them into the Q&A or the chat, and Chloe and David will pick them up. We'll feed those questions to Shazmin and give her a chance to answer them, either online, live to you, or else possibly later on. Now, Shazmin herself comes from a non-traditional background and was the first woman in her family to pursue higher education, to undertake a PhD and a career in technology, a number of significant family firsts there. So, having given you all that information, I would like to introduce you to Chloe Basu, our interviewer for this evening, for this fireside chat. Chloe, over to you, and tell us more about the session you're going to have with Shazmin.
Hi, Darlin, thank you, and welcome everyone to the session. So the session will be split into two sections. One will be on Shazmin's work at EPAM and to learn a little bit more about what EPAM does and her role there. And then the second half, we're going to look at her doctorate and learn a little bit more about the very interesting work that she did there. So without further ado, Shazmin, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about your role as the user and research lead for the UK at EPAM, please?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, Darlin, thank you for an amazing introduction. It truly is an honor today to speak about my experiences. So my role falls within the Global Research and Insights team at EPAM. So it's the R&I team. And it's led by the incredible, inspirational Dr. Alexandra Diening. So what do we do at the R&I team? We very much focus on understanding. May it be users, their environments, or the market. And we do that by using human-focused research and data, but always trying to adopt a scientific lens when it comes to our investigations. Because we believe that when we work with our clients to create something, especially something exceptional, it starts with that process of understanding. So we try and use some best-in-class innovative research methods to aid our investigation of understanding. We're a team of 33 plus researchers, and I'm quite proud that we're split between 3 or 4 different continents, actually. And we have a team with 14 members who have PhDs across things like, obviously, HCI, which is what I fall under, things like economics or even neuroscience. So in terms of the specific competencies within our R&I team, we use things like cognitive science and behavioral modeling to understand, we use things like emerging technology, things like data science, as well as human factors and usability. So in terms of my role specifically for user research insight lead, this is a new role for me. So as Darlin said, I've spent a lot of time working within the academic parts of IT and computer science. So I took a leap into the business world a year ago, and I started off as a lead UX researcher. And there's a discourse within anybody that's moving from academia to business around the journey. And the journey for me has been really, really exciting, especially navigating the business context, developing things like business savviness, business acumen. It's a journey and something I'm very much enjoying. So day to day, my role is to conduct and manage research streams for our clients. And I came to EPAM with a varied kind of research trajectory and kind of trained in many different types of methodologies. So I draw on them in my role on various kind of qualitative methodologies, or may it be quantitative methodologies, to really aid in our mission in understanding. And I focus specifically on our UK market and our UK clients because I'm part of EPAM London. So I'm really proud to be part of the team at EPAM, especially the R&I team. We're a very diverse bunch, both culturally and from a skill set perspective. There's heaps of industry experience, and this is really interesting for me because I'm navigating the business world, and I feel very supported in that. And there's lots of future focus initiatives that I'm really interested in, such as the use of generative AI.
Fantastic. And I think that really gives us a great insight and actually some very interesting topics that we'll dive a bit more into in the session. Can you just tell us a little bit more about what EPAM does as a business?
Absolutely, I would love to. So EPAM's been around since I was born, actually, so I'm trying to give away my age here, but EPAM's been around since 1993. And it has a rich software engineering heritage and has become a global digital transformation provider. I know Dalim paid a visit to EPAM the other day, but EPAM has many different facets. It has things like integrated advisory, consulting, and design capabilities, and this unique kind of engineering DNA. So we're spread globally. We have teams in major countries across the globe, and we have hybrid teams, which of course I'm a part of. And we work with our clients and communities to really help them, achieve what it is they want to achieve. And may that be by things like powering better enterprise, or may it be education or health platforms. Essentially is to connect people, improve experiences, and hopefully have a positive impact on people's lives. EPAM is also a recognized leader, which is something, again, that I'm really part of. So it's been features as one of the top 15 companies in IT services on the Fortune 1000, also ranked as the top IT services company on Fortune's 100 fastest growing companies list. So hopefully that should give you a good whistle-stop tour of EPAM.
It definitely does. And I honestly didn't know they did that many things. So really astounding to see how fast they're growing and how many different things they offer.
Absolutely. Yes. It's a wonderful company.
Oh, glad you enjoy it. And just a question around learning and development. It sounds like it's a big part of your job. How do you go about learning and continuing to develop in your career and in your sort of field of practice?
Yeah, this is a really pertinent question. So again, just a little bit of background. I started EPAM a year ago, and I only submitted and defended my PhD a month and a half ago. So in the course of working full-time in consulting, I was also doing my PhD. So I've had a big learning overload at the moment, but nonetheless, I really want to share my approach. I think one of the benefits of coming from a non-traditional background into this space is that you can look at things from a different lens. Now, my background is very traditionally psychology based. As Dalim said, I kind of trained in psychology, and I spent most of my time in mental health services, may that be improving patient experiences or treatment. So I try and look at things from that lens at all time. So when I think about professional growth or continuous learning, I think more about my emotional relationship actually with learning and professional growth. I sort of check in with, where is my desire to learn? Where is the curiosity? And curiosity being the key here. Because we live in this pervasive digital world where the opportunities for, say, learning are very much on our doorstep. We're one click away from an online course or some sort of learning platform that we can ingest information, as well as professional growth. So the opportunity is certainly there. But I know that in a world that we live in right now, where we've got busy schedules, we're navigating things like profession, life, and everything in between. I try and bring it back to that emotional relationship that I have with my curiosity and how I can honor that and harness it. So I try and have a better relationship when it comes to my curiosity, especially now that I've finished my PhD. I give it the space to run free and to enjoy the process of learning. And for me, this isn't just limited to the professional sphere, because we can develop, our curiosity isn't just limited to that domain. We can have personal curiosity. So it could very much be that I'm really interested, which is very true at the moment, about the inner mechanisms of things like generative AI. So I'll go onto a Google course and I'll honor that curiosity. I'll give it space and give it time despite my busy schedule, because it's important. But also, if some odd personal topic crops up. And this is an example, it's a bit of a silly one, but I recently had an influx of curiosity about Tudor history, really started getting interested in the wives of Henry VIII and which one survived, which one got beheaded, all these things. And I let that curiosity also run free. I read some books, I watched some shows about this sort of stuff. So I try and approach that curiosity in a light-hearted, fun way and really enjoy myself absorbing the material. Because, in my opinion, curiosity is absolutely the key to innovative thinking. And when I think about my role and I think about the rapport I have to build with clients or really vouch for, say, things like research and to do that, yes, of course, the curiosity very much comes in hand. I could be having a conversation about generative AI and there may be sprinkles of some piece of information I've got about Tudor history, and you never know, it could just bag you, the client. So the bottom line here for me is to harbor and harness the curiosity that we have. And the value of curiosity is very much being recognized now. In fact, in a study that was conducted with 1,500 global executives, it was found that curiosity is one of the 3 skills needed for the future. So yeah, have a good relationship with your curiosity, give it space, because I truly believe that curiosity is the key to innovative thinking.
Couldn't agree with you more. One thing you mentioned though, it sounded like you did your doctorate at the same time as working. How did you balance doing both at the same time? Sort of workloads, time spent on that, and I guess also time to enjoy and relax yourself as well. Yeah, it was tough. I'm not even going to glamorize it. And when I come back to some later questions, I really want to talk about that experience some more. It was very tough. I definitely have a few white hairs and wrinkles I shouldn't have just from having to manage the whole thing. But I had a really supportive team at EPAM. And because many people in the team also have done their PhDs, there was that relatability there. So I had some space and some time. For example, I took some time off to write my thesis. But it was very much, doing the thesis after a long day at work and really just pushing through because I really valued finishing the PhD. But yeah, it's not an easy thing and takes kind of high level organization, like slotting your days. Okay, this is EPAM in the morning and then have a break, and in the evening PhD work, knowing where your limits are and also understanding how to take care of yourself as well. I'm a very big advocate of that, coming from a mental health background. So I would take days off, every other week and just let my brain just rest a little bit. But yeah, I only finished it a month and a half ago, and it's strange. I still feel the stress even though it's done, because you get addicted to the stress, I think, sometimes as well. Definitely, and congratulations as well for finishing your doctorate. Should we move on to learning a little bit more about your doctorate and the areas that you researched and what you did it on? Absolutely, absolutely. So should we go into should I talk about my doctorate in HCI? Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Absolutely. So this is one topic that, of course, I love talking about because my PhD was 4 years long and you have this obsessive relationship with it. But just to give a little bit more background into how I came into my PhD before I speak about the mechanisms of my PhD. So I started off my journey, as mentioned, from a very psychological perspective, and it was focused on patient experience, improving mental health services and treatments. But regardless of whatever roles I had within the sector, one thing that really pushed me forward was this passion that I had towards contributing towards better healthcare for everybody. And within these roles, there was a few stop points where I had conversations with people, and this was at the University of Nottingham where I was working, where we started to have these really cool and interesting conversations about how the pervasive nature of technology can be harnessed to improve healthcare. Like, what are the kind of things we can do? And this was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we were having these conversations, and that was very much the brink of this
huge revolution and this change that we've had. And thinking about that, it was completely non-disputable for me that I wanted to be involved in that first step we were taking towards this innovation. So within the University of Nottingham, there's this amazing Centre for Doctoral Training that I happened to fall across when I was thinking in this way. And it's a doctoral training school that was based in the Department of Computer Science, but it welcomed people that didn't come from computer science to do PhDs within computer science. And they're very much facilitating that learning experience. And traditionally PhDs are 3 years, but this was a 4-year course, so that you can take the first year to really adapt yourself into doing a PhD in computer science, namely human-computer interaction. And what's interesting, and it has synergies with the BCS, is that it's all about doing research for good. But in this case, it was using data for good. So I worked with the Centre for Doctoral Training, Horizon Centre for Doctoral Training, and I carved out my PhD proposal. And it was focused on exploring the role of mobile technology, namely things like mobile applications, in understanding symptoms for mental health. So this used my experience within the mental health sector, but I was able to kind of translate it into a HCI, a human-computer interaction project, because there's some nice synergies there between psychology and HCI. And there's 3 things that I'm going to speak about in order to kind of guide you through my PhD journey. Firstly, my PhD was focused on a condition called bipolar disorder. Now, bipolar disorder, as many of you may know, is a condition characterized by 2 types of symptoms. One is more overactivity, which falls under manic symptoms, and the other is depressive symptoms, which is very much an underactivity, kind of low energy, low function. Now, this condition is interesting, especially from a technological perspective, because the behaviors present in, say, a manic episode are very different compared to those that are present in a depressive episode. It's almost like a 2-in-1 condition. So I was interested in the role that mobile technology can play in understanding these symptoms and how it can help the user to better manage their health. So I looked at 2 different types of data. One was passively collected data. So this was data that was collected in the background via a mobile application. So we looked at automatically collected data when it came to number of calls or number of texts or GPS location, Bluetooth devices in the vicinity. We looked at things like app usage, so how long people are spending on certain apps. We looked at mobile banking information. We're looking at all that information to understand whether there was anything there that could be related back to the healthcare experience, namely the manic and depressive symptoms. And on top of that, we looked at actively collected data. Now, the difference between the actively and the passively collected data was that the actively collected data was based on user input. So this was information users were providing about their mood or their medication or their mental health. And the combination of this data was looked at to understand symptoms of BD, bipolar disorder. So there's many moving parts to my PhD. And the first phase was very much, and I'm sure many people on the call today will understand that, the first phase was around discovery. It was about me discovering the landscape. So many of us have Fitbits, Apple Watches, we track our steps. It's certainly an era of the quantified self, let's say. So I wanted to understand, how do people with this condition actually use these devices to self-track? So I ran some workshops to understand very much the everyday experiences of self-tracking. And this wasn't just limited to technology, but even if people were using things like pen and paper, or if they were mentally self-tracking. I really wanted to understand those processes, because the aim here was to really create something that was meaningful and that closely aligns to this very personal experience of mental health. And the second part of this discovery was around understanding what are the interactions between the user and technology. And the question I had is, in fact, how much are these users, this unique user group, involved in current self-tracking technology that we see at the moment? So I went through the literature and I looked at levels of user involvement. What are the levels? How much are people being involved? Because for me, coming from a healthcare background, it seemed kind of obvious that the user would be involved, given how personal the healthcare experience is, especially mental healthcare. And when I explored the literature in depth, I found that despite recommendations of things like user-centered design, users with this condition were not very much involved in the process of the design and development of this technology. And that very much shocked me. So I looked at the systemic aspects of this, because the interesting thing about healthcare technology is that it's very much this intersection between healthcare and technology and IT services, HCI. So there's this intersection there. And both of these disciplines have very unique vocabulary when it comes to involving humans in the process of, say, design and development. And within HCI practices, we have a super extended vocabulary when it comes to user involvement. There's things like user-centered design. There's things like design thinking or participatory design. The very kind of extended vocabulary. And when it comes to healthcare, there's a complete different vocabulary that isn't tailored towards technology, but it's very much the case that patients and members of the public are involved in things like designing research. So designing the way, say, questions are asked in interviews. They're involved in things like analysis, and often they're co-interviewers, they're co-facilitators in things like workshops. So I thought, okay, this is the intersection. How can we do better as practitioners in this space when we're responsible for designing and developing tools that can really improve people's lives? So what I did is I drew upon these two methodologies to make this really intense user involvement methodology. So I took the iterative processes that you see in things like HCI, and I ran things like workshops and interviews to really understand these everyday practices. But I also drew upon the methodologies that I saw in the healthcare sector, and I involved the users in things like designing the workshops, getting involved in the analysis, and as far as them running the workshops with me, co-facilitating the workshops, really empowering the users to get involved, because I really wanted to account for these unique experiences, these individual differences and the variability that's found in this condition. So that was the first part of my PhD and the bit that I really, really enjoyed. Then what I did is I use all of these insights to work within a multidisciplinary team to design the tool. And what we did is we tested it for a 6-month period with a small group of users. There was 8 users that we tested it with, but over a period of 6 months. And it wouldn't be a project without some issues, right? So I had many issues when it came to data collection during my PhD. So though we had some insights into the data in that it was very useful for people to have their data collected in this way, they were very accepting of the passive, automatically collected aspects of data collection, but there was always kind of issues around security and who this data was being shared with. So those were the kind of numerical kind of insights that I gained from my PhD, but what was most pertinent was actually the qualitative, the rich insights that were gained. We found that the users enjoyed using the tool, and the most important finding was that it helped them to understand themselves and their mood better. And that was a big win for me during my PhD. In fact, when we thought about how our users were using the tool over the period of 6 months, we had a dropout rate of less than 10%. And when we compared it to other studies that are similar in this space, we saw dropout rates of over 50%. So I'm hoping that this means that the methodology that we used hopefully aligned our tool to be better, more aligned with the everyday experiences of BD. And when it comes to exploring the data further during my PhD, because there's some really interesting aspects of this passive and active collected data, the project's been refunded to open up the testing of the tool with 200 users and hopefully gain some really interesting insights about the value of the data. So there's my PhD in a nutshell. I hope I haven't bored you guys too much.
I think everyone would agree that was very interesting and sounds like a very interesting PhD that you did do. You touched upon a lot of the sort of interactions that you can have between humans and technology. I guess apart from the ones that you gave examples of, are there any other interactions that you've come across maybe in your working day or while you were doing your doctorate?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to comment on that. There's kind of many types of key interactions that you can have between humans and computers. And within my PhD, I focused on input, right? So it was kind of users doing things like engaging with the apps on their phone and using their phone and how that can be used to understand their behavior, their mood, their symptoms. That's one aspect of a key interaction between human and computers. The other is output. This is where computer systems can provide feedback or output to humans in different ways, things like displaying text or images or videos or animations, that kind of thing. And then I'll delve a little bit deeper into more kind of complex interactions. So we have things like GUI, so we have graphical user interface. I know it's almost dinner time now, so I'm going to just make you think about ordering something at McDonald's. So that's a graphical user interface where the users are able to interact with, using visual elements such as icons or buttons or menus or windows, and you're able to easily kind of manipulate and navigate the digital environment. Other types of interactions include things like command line interface. This isn't something I've done much work on, but think about terminal, for example, your terminal prompt on, say, your MacBook or anything like that. But it's when we interact with computer systems using text-based commands, and the computer executes that in the way that you've asked. The other way that I wanted to kind of touch upon was things like NLP, so natural language processing. Think about your OK Google. So it's very much voice assistants, chatbots, language-based search engines utilize natural language processing. And these are techniques to understand as well as respond to things like user queries or commands. The other three aspects I just want to touch upon. The first was gestures and motions. You know, we live in a real advancement when it comes to technology that we can interact with it using gestures and motions. You know, things like Wii or Microsoft Kinect are just some examples there. What's really interesting that really gets me excited are things like augmented and virtual reality. There's lots of advancements in this space, and especially when just drawing that back to my PhD and within healthcare, there's been some incredible literature published in recent years about things like virtual reality and how that can be harnessed in understanding mental health. Specifically, virtual reality has been used in phobia treatment, where psychologists are able to provide therapy using virtual reality. And the interesting part of this is that it actually has lasting effects beyond the virtual environment to the real world. So some super cool stuff happening there. And then we have things like augmented reality, which is of course within the user's physical environment, just with some augmentation. And lastly, we have machine learning, and we have things like artificial intelligence. Thinking about, ChatGPT, these kinds of things where humans can interact with computers and computers can learn from them to improve their performance, provide things like intelligent responses or personalized recommendations. And we're very much seeing that within kind of things like ChatGPT. So yeah, these are the kinds of interactions that I've come across in my career so far. Some very, very exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this space is going to be developing.
Definitely, and I mean, ChatGPT is, I've never seen anything like it. The things it can do is really amazing. So yeah, very excited to see where that, and where that kind of space is going to go in the future. Absolutely, yes. So you gave us a fantastic, oh, actually, sorry, we've got one question from the chat. So why don't we go to that? So the question is, the somewhat controversial Microsoft ribbon interface introduced in Office 2007 is protected by at least 9 design patents. Are commercial intellectual property interests overpowering the ethical motivations for improving the user experience?
Sorry, I'm just reading the question.
No problem.
Are commercial intellectual property interests overpowering the ethical motivations for improving the user experience? Yes, absolutely. I think they can do. I think there has to be a value there on the user experience, especially things around ethical concerns and ethical issues that arise from, interacting with this type of technology. But this is, again, a discourse that's becoming a lot more on the horizon now. We're seeing a lot more conversation about the ethical aspects of UX. It's huge. It's huge. Things like gaining consent, understanding what the impacts are on behavior, things like using dark UX even to, create things like addiction within certain computer systems. So I think that it can sometimes overpower the user experience, but I think things are very much changing in this space as well. Thank you for your question. Thank you, Nick.
So one more question from me. You mentioned, and you gave us a great explanation of what you covered in your doctorate. Are there any wider topics or other issues that you touched upon in your research, or maybe that you wrote about as part of your doctorate?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I'm really interested to reflect upon, because it kind of ties into Nick's question a little bit about the value of understanding the user experience. And when I was exploring this in my PhD, I found that users with severe mental health issues were not being involved as much as they should be when it comes to the design and development of this kind of pervasive technology, right? And what was even more disappointing to see that there was a lack of parity between physical health users compared to mental health users. And it's the notion that sometimes users aren't involved in this. The user experience isn't valued when it comes at a cost to people. When it's difficult to do, what do people do? That's the question. And that's why in my PhD it was very important for me to try and do things better and really involve the user in the process, even when it's not that easy to do. There's lots of systemic issues you have when it comes to involving the users. You have to have budget, you have to have access to the right user group. Sometimes, especially in the case of, say, my PhD, you have people who are not feeling very well. So there's some aspects of advocating for them and their experience. So what I'm trying to say is that sometimes as HCI researchers, we shouldn't limit ourselves to the domain that we work on. We should really try and push the boundary and really translate our experiences to the domain that we are working on. Learn about what, for example, in my case, what is the patient experience? What are the issues here? And how do I create a methodology to involve users that is inclusive? We have to refine our crafts and understand the idiosyncrasy, I can never say that word, idiosyncratic nature of the domain that we're working on. And I spoke about this recently, actually, in a blog post that was published with EPAM today. And it was about just casting the net a little bit wider. It was about digital health companies and digital health startups and how they've forgotten in the course of growing so huge, this domain is huge, digital health is, how we've forgotten to understand the patient and the detrimental effects that has on digital health startups, where a lot of them do unfortunately have failures within the first 5 years of inception. But we have to understand the inner mechanisms of how things work. So that's one of the topics that I've touched upon, and something that I'm constantly screaming and shouting about is that don't forget, like, to look at things from bottoms up to really make a huge difference, especially when it comes to really specific domains like healthcare.
Great, thank you. And I think the point you mentioned around the sort of user groups that you were asking questions with leads quite nicely onto this next question. So it's from Rob, and the question is, what are some of the most interesting findings that you discovered in your PhD research around better ways to gather qualitative insights? And are any of these findings possibly applicable to other user groups or demographics?
Yeah, this is a great question. So better ways to gather qualitative insights. So for me, what I did, I don't have bipolar disorder. I have no idea what it feels like to have that condition, right? So when I was drafting the questions to gain these qualitative insights, I didn't know how to ask the questions. I took a beginner's mindset with this sort of stuff. Let's start right at the start. So though I drafted some stuff together, I took it out to people who have lived experience of bipolar disorder, and very nice conversation. Hey, this is what I'm thinking. Help me to ask the right questions. How do I even explain certain things? Even the word self-tracking technology, is that relevant within this user group? I'm not sure. So those are the kinds of ways that you can really improve your qualitative insights. And even before you're gaining the insights, you can really put yourself at the best place possible. And when I was running things like interviews, workshops, and sessions, especially workshops where it was quite overwhelming, we had 10 to 12 people in a workshop setting, many who had lived experience of things like bipolar disorder. So what I did was I took a back seat. We drafted the workshops together, and those that had lived experience of these conditions were the ones that facilitated the workshop. Whereas I just guided it and steered it, made sure we were keeping to time and making sure the conversations were, kind of going the right kind of way. And the insights we got were really, really interesting. And we had the benefit of having to compare this to other insights that took more traditional approaches when it came to research. And there were some differences there in things like themes and connotations. And for example, we found that social and communicative aspects of self-tracking were really important in our user group. But when we looked at the literature, we found that the clinical relationship was really important. So these kinds of soft differences, but they really can guide the better development of things like technology. And the second part of your question, Rob, is around the applicability. Absolutely. I think within the context of severe mental health, I think very much my findings are applicable. And within the mental health care context altogether. But largely, I think it's a good kind of starting point when you're talking about healthcare in general, about thinking about the patient. Those with mental health issues are less likely to be involved, but there's a general problem within the healthcare domain that we are forgetting about the patient experience. Thank you for your question, Rob.
Thank you, Shazmin. Oh, great. One more question from me. Do you have any tips for people who are looking to do a doctorate or work in the HCI area?
Absolutely. Lots of tips. I feel like a wise owl now, but so one thing that I'd like to say is that if you're thinking about doing a doctorate in this area, just completely forget about this fallacy we have around this linear journey we have between A and B. I started off in 2010 doing a psychology degree, and now I'm talking here to you guys at the British. It's crazy talking about computer science, and that journey is not linear. It's not between A to B. In fact, within that journey, I ended up sometimes at Z, and then I went to Mars for a little while, and maybe, I don't know, focus on some, whatever. I went so many different ways, but all of those, let's say, parts of the journey really contributed towards my understanding when it came to HCI, and I had the pleasure of really translating those experiences into something meaningful. So very much what I'm trying to say is embrace the varied experience. It's a good thing to have this background and be able to translate it. It's that kind of curiosity that I was speaking about, and how it can really kind of promote innovative thinking. The other thing that I wanted to say is I did my PhD within a Centre for Doctoral Training at the University of Nottingham. And this was a 4-year program. It had lots of structure around learning and development. And also, I started with 13 people who were on the journey with me. PhDs can sometimes be quite lonely journeys. And to have those 13 people that I started with, some of which are my best dear friends, I'm attending weddings and kids and all that sort of stuff this year, it was nice to have that touch points with them where we could reflect on the journey, because it is a wonderfully and sometimes weird journey. So to have that kind of group there that are going through the same things with you was amazing. And hats off to the Horizon Centre for Doctoral Training, who consistently made all of us feel very supported and really vouched for us as individuals. So if you are thinking about doing a PhD in this space, look for Centre for Doctoral Trainings, because you just have the structure and the development there. The other thing around HCI, and often the case that HCI is becoming very interdisciplinary. And you'll often have supervisors that come from different departments. So mine consisted of a HCI professor, someone that specialized in data science and analytics, and someone who was a psychiatrist. And I was very lucky to have an amazing supervision experience, but that's because I was given time to speed date my supervisors and understand them. And actually think, can I be friends with this person? Because you're going to talk to them a lot every single day. Ask them lots of questions, see how they respond. Is their way of kind of approaching these things aligned with who you are? Because that will make a fantastic PhD experience, because things chop and change all the time. My PhD supervisors had to deal with me constantly thinking about millions of things, and it's nice to feel supported in that. And lastly, and I know, Chloe, you asked me this question about managing full-time work and PhDs. And the wise old owl I am today, I'm going to say, please finish your thesis before you start your role in this industry. HCI, computer science, is a very sought out industry, let's say, and you may start getting LinkedIn interviews and this kind of thing, but just finish that process. Enjoy the process of writing your thesis. I have some friends who actually took that advice and had wonderful experiences where they sat in the park and, you know, wrote some words and the birds were chirping, all this sort of stuff. For me, it wasn't like that, unfortunately. I was trying to manage many, many things. But yeah, finish one experience, and I'm sure there's lots of opportunities to bag that dream job after you finish.
Fantastic. Fantastic advice. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the audience? Feel free to stick your hand up, or, you know, come off mute or type into the chat. Okay, if not, are there any final thoughts or reflections that you wanted to leave everyone with, I guess, before we all head off?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for attending today and listening to me bang on about my PhD and my role. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if there's any other questions. I'd really appreciate you dropping a line and just, yeah, and staying connected. But yeah, thank you, everyone. It's been honestly, it's been an amazing experience.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Shazmin, for your time. Really appreciate it. And it's been a really interesting Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Darling, you're on mute.
Unmute. Hello.
Hi.
Well, Shazmin, that was indeed a revelation. Very insightful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating because when I spoke to Shazmin originally at EPAM, I thought that she would be half as interesting as she actually has been. So I was wrong about that. I'm really sorry. But this illustrates a couple of other things. One, I know that Shazmin is keen to explore the world of BCS and, you know, how we can push forward the multivarious world of IT, and we will be exploring that with her. But let me just ask you to join me in giving a big round of applause to Shazmin, also to Chloe, and of course to David, and then I'll give you some final words afterwards. So thank you very much, Shazmin, Chloe, David. Okay, now let's switch back to me being the chairman of these three great groups in BCS. What we've done is have a Wominspiration session, inspiring women with inspiration for everyone. And you can see that Shazmin has lots of ideas and inspiration for you, including curiosity is the key, of course, which is very fundamental and great advice. But in terms of what we're trying to do in our BCS groups, we are running a number of initiatives where members of our committee take the lead in certain initiatives. So one of them, no surprise, is the AI initiative. And you've just seen a great link up with the AI initiative right now. There are also numbers of others. HCI is an initiative that we want to launch. And so, in fact, is health IT, health informatics. And Shazmin has touched on a number of occasions with health, mental health, digital health, and so on. And those are areas that we want to promote. She's mentioned about AR and VR, augmented and virtual realities. And we've had webinars and events on these, but we want to do more. She's also, of course, mentioned startups. That too is something that we're very much into. And we have an Innovation Hubs initiative running. And HEIT, higher education IT. This again has been a very much a link up with the HEIT initiative. So we've got all of these initiatives coming up, but we will have more events on them, webinars, hybrid events, and in-person events. But I just want to mention something that Shazmin has said in terms of all the areas that are coming up. What I've got in mind, my strategy, if you will, is to do more for us and us doing more for our environment, our planet, if you will. I'm talking, of course, about the United Nations SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that were mapped out by the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, numerous other global bodies as our lifeline to a sustainable planet by the year 2030. And just to give you an indication, there are 16 major SDGs. Number one, guess what, is AI. Then there's blockchain, there's Internet of Things, big data, advanced materials, robotics, AR and VR, 3D printing, drones, 5G, synthetic biology, cloud, internet access, and of course, others like quantum. That's what we're interested in. And we know that of those 16, IT touches and can substantially help at least 10 of them. So if you're interested in what we're doing, come and join us. If you're not interested, surely you're interested in our planet and the world. Let's do more for that as well. So those are some of the themes behind what you've just seen and heard. I invite you to keep in touch with Shazmin, great, but also keep in touch with us. You will see much more from us on these themes and more Wominspiration events as well. So thank you very much for being part of this session. See you again next time. Goodbye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.